Okay. Well, welcome to our Tuesday night Torah class. Great weather out, isn't it? Makes you want to have it outside. Yeah. Let me open in a word of prayer. Father God, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thank you for your Torah. Thank you for working in the hearts of the group of people that's here. And I just ask you to be with our discussion tonight. Be in our discussion. Help us to learn the things that you have for us. I appreciate the fact that you teach each of us at the pace that we're able to take, and you teach us the things that we need to learn. And I just thank you for your Torah and ask that you bless our time. In Yahushua's name, amen. Okay, we're moving along at a rather slow pace because theoretically, if we were doing this the way the yearly cycle runs, we would be at the end of chapter 11 by now. And here we are in chapter 3. But I'm okay with it, and I like to take votes every now and then. If anybody has any complaints about the speed at which we are progressing, I'd like to hear them. Is this okay? The way we're doing this all right? Okay. I really I got a lot out of the discussion we had last week. Chapter 3 in Genesis, just in terms of review, was when Adam and Eve decided to go ahead and take a little bite of that tree, of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it was a really fun discussion, I thought, to talk about that. There was a lot of things that we got out of it. I learned some new stuff. One of the things I was kind of excited about, and I don't know if I expressed it properly, was I was just interested in that word naked that proceeded through there a lot. But there was a lot of discussion that came about a lot of other things. Did anybody have any particular thing? I don't think we didn't spend much time on what happens in verse 14 and beyond. So I thought we might spend a little time there. But the first 14 verses of chapter 3, did anybody have any other thoughts that went by over the week? John?
I didn't realize, but it said that in verse 6, and he gave also unto her husband with her. It's just interesting that it uses the word husband there.
Yeah, that's good. I was the one that got me was who was with her. So he was in there. It's like whenever this discussion was going on between the serpent and Eve, he was standing there watching. That thought had never occurred to me before, but that seems to be what that indicates. Then at the end there, when God finally confronts them in verse 11, it says, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Of course, he knows the answer to that. But then both of them, they have these excuses. The man said, well, the woman that you put here with me, she gave it to me, and I ate it. And the woman says, what is this? Or God says, what is this you have done? And she says, well, the serpent deceived me, and I ate it. So both of them, they didn't deny what they had done, but they had excuses for why they did it. Just a second, Joe. We'll get you a microphone.
Yeah, it's interesting where Adam was staying by Eve when Satan was tempting her.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't he speak up?
Oh yeah. That's why he was held equally guilty.
And I might be cutting my own throat by saying this. A lot of times it's the woman's prerogative. She overrides the man. And anyway, and it's interesting also that Satan did not confront him. He confronted the woman.
Yeah.
Which evidently he might have seen something psychologically in her where he could put the
could be. Certainly it could be.
Yeah,
it could be. The ultimate fault, of course, was they fell for the deception. They didn't catch the lie. Of course, the discussion was, this sentence that verse 6, the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food, which is the lust of the flesh, pleasing to the eye, which is the lust of the eyes, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, the pride of life. So she was tempted by those things, even though it was the serpent that basically made her stop and dwell on that. John?
A couple other points. The Nakash didn't say you were naked. They made that their own conclusion.
Yep.
That's what the case was.
Yep.
And I also find it interesting, if he's the husband, it's interesting that she gave him the fruit.
Mm-hmm.
He should be if he's the husband, he's the welfare provider, if you will, and he should have, the roles were reversed, it seems to me.
Yeah. I think it also bases certainly on what we've learned from the Torah since then, or in our walk, that he, to some degree, abrogated his responsibility. I mean, he shares in her guilt honestly, because he kind of had a responsibility of saying, look, you shouldn't do that.
Well, in Deuteronomy, it refers to if the man hears his wife say an oath
Yep.
and he doesn't say anything about the oath, then
Yep.
her oath stands.
Yep.
And he didn't say anything.
Yep.
So maybe that's why she was questioned and not him.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's part of it. Well, although someone did point out that it wasn't necessarily an oath. But the point is you're still right. It was from one of the things we learned from that lesson in Deuteronomy is that it's his responsibility to put a stop to something that he knows is wrong, especially in the marriage, and he didn't do it.
Is kibosh, is that Yiddish or something?
Kibosh. City in Ohio, I don't know. Okay, let's see. We can move on. I guess we certainly read verses 14 through the end of the chapter, and we talked a little bit about it. We talked about these curses. I'll read it. Oh, Mike, go ahead.
I was going to ask you about the second part of verse 16. Were you going to read that?
We can read that, and then we'll talk about it in just a second. So
Okay.
you can even hang on to the microphone if you want. Can I read it? I'll just read. I'm going to start in verse 14. So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all the livestock and all the wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. To the woman he said, I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. To Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all living. And Yahweh Elohim made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. And Yahuwah Elohim said, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. Okay, your question was in verse 16?
Yeah, the second part. This Bible I have is an ESV. It actually says, your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. And I've read where people have said that the woman almost like competes now with the husband for control. Is that how you kind of? Because most versions say what you read, where your desire shall be for your husband.
Yeah. No, but I think that kind of says the same thing. I think the phrase you use, compete for control, is probably, that captures, this is my opinion, that captures it pretty completely. Because if among other things, he's certainly establishing the man as the head of the household. And what he's saying is that he's the head of the household, and you aren't going to like it sometimes. That's what I got out of that, but maybe it's wrong. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Joe's got something.
I was just looking at this word cunning. Satan was very sneaky.
Yep. That's the
'Cause
same word as
he's-
naked.
He saw something weak in Eve. That's why I think that he approached her instead of Adam. And being cunning, like you have a hidden agenda behind it.
Yep.
It's sneaky.
Yeah. Well, in a way.
Blindsided her.
Yep. In a way, that kind of, like I say, one of the things we talked about last week was that word cunning and the word naked are the same words. And it kind of implies just what you said. He saw in her that she was more vulnerable than Adam was. And so that's part of the reason that he went after her. Yeah.
One of the things when I was looking at this week is the word serpent, the nakash. It's actually used in a noun and a verb form.
Really? Okay.
And the verb form of it, which is where the noun form comes from,
Sure.
means to practice divination.
Oh, really?
Yeah. To learn secret or forbidden things, or it implies the power to learn secret or forbidden things. And the nakash, which is interpreted as serpent, I wonder sometimes if that's the full, real meaning of what that is, and without really knowing Hebrew, I wouldn't know. It says serpent, but when you look it up, it says because it speaks like with a hissing sound.
okay.
So I'm wondering if they used serpent because of that connotation of the hissing sound. I immediately thought of those that peep and mutter and whisper incantations and because of the word for divination. And I thought it was interesting that it says that dust you'll eat and everything, because it says man will return to dust. He was
Yep.
made from dust.
Yep.
But I wonder if this serpent, and we assume that it was either Satan or inhabited by Satan, possessed, whatever. But it says all the days of your life. So does it have a lifespan? Could it be something that was just in cahoots with the adversary?
Well, that
Certainly
that could be.
It's an interesting.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I like about what you're talking about was that if it really does mean one who learns divination or the act of learning divination, that's kind of the essence of what the evil one's sin was. And that's the essence of the appeal to this whole thing what he says is, well, the reason he told you not to eat of that fruit is because he knows that when you eat of it, you will become like God. And so this becoming like God thing is the thing that I think is the most telling characteristic of Satan, is that he's trying to take over. And whenever, that's at the heart of an awful lot of us. That's usually when we're sinning, it's because we're trying to take over for God. Yep. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that his own desire he was projecting
Yeah.
toward her.
Yeah. Let's see. Did anybody have anything interesting to talk about the curses that God placed on the serpent and Adam and Eve?
Wanda does, and I have something that's probably not so interesting as what she's going to have to say.
Well, do you want to go first or second?
I'm going to go first and
Okay.
let her steal the show.
Okay.
Oh, that was a compliment, love.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that the word he will rule over you or have dominion over you is completely different than the Hebrew word that was in Genesis 1:28 when he said that he would have dominion over
the garden and the animals,
and the earth. Yeah. The one that is in 3:16 is mashal, and I could be pronouncing that wrong, whereas the one that is in Genesis 1:28 is radah.
Okay, so they're very different
So
words.
They're different words, but they have something similar to mean, but without, again, getting into a deeper so to what that word means, there probably has a little bit of something at it in its roots. But
Yeah. I could imagine it might have, I'm just making this up, but it might have some difference because dominion of one person over another is a much different thing than dominion over a garden or the animal kingdom or something like that. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But for those of you that are more interested in Hebrew, you can go down the rabbit trail and figure that out.
Yeah.
What'd you have, Wanda?
I thought it was interesting that with the woman, since I already mentioned about the serpent, the woman, when it says that you'll greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception, when I was looking at that, I really think that he's talking about birth pangs, because well, he mentions pain too, but also multiple births, like twins, triplets, whatever.
Yeah.
And especially since it says conception, and so it defines between the two. And I don't quite understand why that was her curse exactly, other than the fact that it opens the door of possibility for the prophetic to bring redemption to this whole business.
Which is a good enough reason.
Yes.
But, yeah.
But with Adam, what I thought was unique about him is he says 3 times, first he says, have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you? So right there we know that he was given a command.
Yes.
Even though that wasn't, they didn't address that with Eve.
Yep.
You shall not eat of it. Okay, the ground for your sake, in sorrow you shall eat all the days of your life, so that's 1. Thorns and thistles you shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field, that's 3. On the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. So that's 3 things he addresses that has to do with eating. And there were 3 components to her temptation.
That's a good point. That's
I
interesting.
thought, I don't know if there's a connection, but I
Well,
thought.
there may be. There
I
may very
thought it
be.
was interesting.
Yep, that's a good thing to notice. One of the things it says, you will eat the plants of the field, I kind of thought to myself, they didn't say anything about eating animals at that point, did they? To me, I'm always on the lookout for this, because it's an open question as to whether or not mankind was vegetarian until after the flood. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that is an oblique hint that maybe that was the case. I don't know. Just a second, we got one other person over here.
So the Hebrew word is yimshal for rule.
Okay.
It can also be found in Genesis 1:18 when it says, the sun and the moon shall rule over the day and the night.
Okay.
So if you look at that example of what it's using here, it's not like the sun and the moon is, beating or, it's
Subjugating.
It's like authority. You've heard me say that the sun, the moon, the stars have the authority to determine the moeds. And so that's what and oftentimes it's used in a kingship role.
Yeah.
And if you think of Messiah as the ultimate king, that's the way a king should operate. He didn't come in swinging a sword or beating anybody, he came as a suffering servant. And so that's kind of, it's making the decisions on governing or governance.
That's a good, and then you contrast that with the man shall have dominion over the earth, over the plants and all that. Rather than ruling over there, what he's really basically saying is, they will serve you, you won't serve them. Yeah. That's a good point.
Okay, on this vegetarian lifestyle, it was before the flood. So that's all they had was the herbs, and they didn't have animals to eat until after the flood.
Well, they clearly had the animals. It was the question of whether they ate them.
Yeah.
And the answer you're suggesting is no.
Right,
Well,
okay.
I kind of tend to lean that way too.
Okay, then also in verse 17, Adam messed up 2 different ways. He heeded to his wife.
Okay.
And secondly, I don't know, have you ever worked on a farm where thorns and thistles?
Not
It is
particularly.
rough.
Yeah.
Really rough. And so from a translation from the Garden of Eden to the ground, there was no thorns or thistles
Yeah.
in the Garden of
Yeah.
Eden.
Doesn't that sound great? I mean, I was thinking about that too, as basically wandering around and looking at trees and saying, wow, that looks like a good thing to eat, and pulling down one. And, it's just, talk about easy. Yeah. John?
Well, it's almost like they were cursed with not knowing biblical permaculture. Because once you learn how to do that and do it right and stop fighting nature, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
I'm speaking from listening to other people.
Yep.
Going back to this rule or
Yep. Dominion
however you
thing.
want to interpret
Yep.
it. In the context of this word in the lexicon, it says, direction of affairs of a large family as firstborn designate is indicated by Joseph's version of the sheaves. At least so his angry brothers interpreted the vision, shall thou indeed reign over us? That reign is the same word,
mashal, yeah.
context of, are you going to be the one making decisions over the family?
Yeah.
What's interesting here is I hadn't ever really grasped until I just read this, is regarding Adam and Eve, who's the firstborn?
Adam. Yeah, I had noticed that.
Well, there's firstborn rights, aren't there? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody else have one? Alfonso.
All right, I have another question. Because I know here it says, see the man become like one of us to know good and evil, and now lest he put his hand out to take also the tree of high and eat and live forever. Now, is that actually a tree that bears fruit? Because I know in Mark 8:24, people are referred to as trees, and Psalms 1:3, people are referred to as trees, and Yeshua is referred to as an olive tree.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about that for a few minutes. But that's the tree of, it said back in Genesis 1, there are two trees in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. It said, that, among others, and it says, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shouldn't eat from. Didn't say anything about the tree of life, right? But this is the second time that tree of life has been mentioned. And it basically, God's talking to himself here, or he's talking to, the royal we, whatever, however you want to look at it. But he basically says, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So to me, it's real obvious that what he's basically saying here is we don't want him, whatever we is, we don't want him to eat of the tree of life because then he'll live forever. So we got to evict him from the garden and make sure he doesn't come back because we don't want him to do that. We don't want him to live forever. Not in the state he is now, where he knows the difference between good and evil and sometimes doesn't choose good. That's kind of what I get out of that. Is that what you get out of that? Yep. But one of the questions I had about that is, what do they call the Torah? The tree, right? The Torah is the tree. Do you suppose there's a connection between the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the Torah?
So they got kicked out of the Torah-gated community then, the original one?
That's a thought. That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
This kind of goes back to something I mentioned last week. What I get out of this is because Yah knows good and evil, but there is no corruption in him. Mm-hmm. When man discovered good and evil, corruption came into being, sin came into being. But I believe, again, that it was because it was taken in disobedience. If there had not been a command not to eat or whatever, then I don't think it would have produced that.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair. That's a good point. I don't know that this is true, but one of the things that kind of plays out of my mind is that if, you can play these games all day long, but if God had been allowed to interact with Adam and Eve without them having done this for long enough, they would have realized that they didn't need to. That's my thought. But, they didn't.
Well,
Go ahead. We don't mess around with those things.
I can't. Okay. One of the things that I was thinking about is that made me sound really loud. Okay.
Okay.
She wants me here.
Yeah,
Listen to my wife's voice. One of the things that I was thinking about, commandments, you wouldn't know sin. Without the Torah, there would be no knowledge of sin
That's true.
to avoid. So him giving the commandment of don't. There is a commandment. So there, what
But
do you say? But it's not based on his desire and his knowledge of choosing which way. It's based on God's.
yeah, that's okay. Okay, John.
Dovetail on that attitude. It says he didn't acknowledge sin for one thing, and then he said, it was you, God, and that woman you gave me.
Yeah.
So he like doubled down on his sin. He didn't just sin, because sin isn't the problem. You can fix sin if you have the right attitude and you do what the Torah says about how to fix sin.
That's a good point.
It's the transgression of the
Yeah,
sin that
and
kicked
it's
him out.
really clear that it was that point was made. You know, both of them had excuses. Neither of them said, "You're right. I sinned. I'm sorry." Neither of them said that. Yeah.
Okay, when God said, if I can read it without my glasses, that he will become like one of us.
Yes.
God's a jealous God.
Yes.
Okay, the triune God, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. There's no room in heaven for another God. This was another one of Satan's tricks or whatever.
Yeah.
He wanted to be another God, like God, not only to exalt himself over God, but he wanted to be in with the in crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think it was so much the tree of life that it wasn't eating it. It was the fact that God did not want Adam to become like one of them.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else have a comment? Polly does.
Two quick thoughts. One is, without reading it, Romans 8, around 20, talks about how creation is eagerly expecting for the righteous or the sons of God to be revealed. That creation has been, I think it says like wailing as in one in childbirth for the righteous. And I think it kind of makes me think that creation was disappointed too in what took place. They're longing for a restored state, as creation is longing for a restored state as well. Secondly, I think it's Genesis 5. It talks about that when it talks about Lamech had a son named Noah.
Yeah.
And it says that Noah will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. So it's interesting, what is it about Noah that was going to bring comfort to them? Do you have thoughts?
No, but that's good though, because we're going to spend a little time with Noah as we move ahead, and that's worth thinking about. How did he comfort his people? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's what it means. That's rest and comfort is what it means. Rest and comfort.
He mikvah'd the cursed dirt.
Well, mixed with the cursed dirt. That's not bad.
God did.
But anyway, I'm going to sit here and noodle for the next few weeks on we don't want them to eat from the knowledge or from the tree of life, and the fact that the Torah is called the tree of life, because somehow or another there's some connection there, but I'm not sure what it is yet. But just to go along with that connection, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. And on the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the tablets of the Torah, we see the cherubim guarding the tree of life. So
Isn't there a verse like that in Revelations about the sword that's...
maybe, I don't recall it, but you're probably right.
I was hoping somebody else would.
And any other thoughts before we leave chapter 3? Chapter 4 is one of my favorites. We're going to have fun with chapter 4. Yes. Alfonso has a question. That's good. You can take the microphone because I'm going to let you read for a bit.
But this has to do with chapter 1, though, because I guess I didn't say something about it when you was there.
That's okay. You can go back. You just can't go ahead.
Okay. My question is, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And then verse 2, I'm wondering here, and the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the deep. What was going on with the earth then that it came to be formless and empty?
Well, mine doesn't say came to be, but that doesn't mean anything. Mine just says was. Well, or possibly became.
So isn't that an action verb or something that it
Yeah.
came?
Yeah. I don't know what it means. Like I say, the first chapter of Genesis is scary to me. There's too much in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If I didn't, Mark has something. I was going to say if nobody wants to say anything, I'll move on, but that's okay. I think it's highly appropriate that you have a question that Mark has the answer to, because that makes John do all the walking.
Could not be farther apart.
Yeah.
Here, just in the last 2 years, I've started becoming a little fascinated with the word cherub. Mm-hmm. Of course, this is what was on the curtain at the tabernacle, right?
Yep.
So this cherub, when you look at the Hebrew word, it's cherub, and it represents angelic beings, which are represented as part human, part animal, usually used in the plural. Remember the vision of the wheel within a wheel?
Well,
And it had the faces and the animals and all that. Well, they carded, England carded, and I just saw it in their museum, another picture of it just today. They carded the cherubs that guarded the gateway into Babylon, and it was two big stone carved images of, I think one of them was an ox body, the other one was a lion body. They both had the face of an animal, and they both had wings. Mm-hmm. So this was their version of a cherub guarding the entrances to the city.
okay. I thought they had something to do with fire, too, didn't they, or am I wrong about that? Okay, yeah. So, Alfonso, if you'd like to read chapter 4, I'd like to go through the end of verse 16, the first 16 verses of chapter 4.
And Adam knew Hawa, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have gained a man from Yahweh. And again she gave birth to his brother Habel, and Habel became keeper of sheep, but Cain became a tiller of the ground. And it came to be in the course of time that Cain brought an offering, the fruit of the ground, to Yahweh, and Habel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat. And Yahweh looked to Habel and his offering, but he did not look to Cain and his offering. And Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. And Yahweh said to Cain, why are you wroth, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should master it. And Cain told Habel his brother, come, let us go into the field. And it came to be when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Habel, his brother, and killed him. And Yahweh said to Cain, where is Habel, your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's guard? And he said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. And Cain said to Yahweh, my wickedness is too great to bear. See, you have driven me from the face of the ground today, and I am hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. And it shall be that anyone who finds me kills me. And Yahweh said to him, well, if anyone kills Cain, vengeance is taking on him sevenfold. And Yahweh placed a sign for Cain, lest anyone finding him kills him. Is that or 15 or 16?
16, one more, but that's okay. That's good enough. That covers plenty of material. Okay, so let's go back and make sure we've got just the elements of the story, right? First of all, Adam lay with his wife Eve. She became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. Cain. What does that name mean? John?
Cain,
Cain.
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 Well, one of the mean is possession, but it means like purchase as well,
Okay.
which is odd. And
I have
my
brought
crazy,
forth or acquired. So that's like
well,
purchased.
possessing, yeah. But I think in Hebrew, when you purchase something, you say that word.
You say that word.
Anyway, my theory is, and doesn't Eve name him that? It isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't Adam.
Yep.
I'm thinking that it's like she was thinking, well, I can use him to purchase my way back into the garden.
I don't know
As a
how she
set-
thought she might do that.
Well, as some sort of sacrifice to get back in the garden.
Okay.
It's just a crazy
That's a
idea.
thought. Yeah.
So, there's nothing new under the sun. There's always that. Well, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I don't know if she specifically thought that. I do think she thought that possibly, I don't know if Cain was the very first child that they had. We don't really know.
It would kind of indicate that, but you're right.
Maybe she thought because of the promise back in verse 3 where your offspring will bruise his head. Maybe she
Yes.
thought that Cain was
We're going to do that.
going to be the
He's going
redeemer.
to be the guy that did that. Well, that would make sense.
You know,
that would
because
make
you know
sense.
he's just a baby.
Yep. Yep. So then she goes on and has his brother. Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel or Havel. Right?
Which implies that they may have been twins.
It says later.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
they may have been. They may have been. Anyway, I want to get into some of this other stuff here. This Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. Now, if they're vegetarians, what good did it do to keep flocks? For clothing? Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, Cain brought an offering to God from his hands. And then Abel, the first fruit,
Yeah.
it was given to God. It was more superior than.
You're answering a question we haven't asked yet, but that's good.
But anyway, it was Cain's was inferior because it was through his hands instead of Allah's hands.
Okay, that's fine. But, okay, and nobody has a problem with Abel raising flocks. I got, certainly the animals for clothing is one part, although, you know, there's such a thing as, cotton fiber and flax for linen and stuff like that, but that's neither here nor there. And there's also a thought that, milk and cheese,
It's also, David,
beg your pardon, beasts of burden. Yeah, we got to plow the field. That's a good one. That's a good one. Got to have oxen to plow those fields.
and the voice.
Why Abel was raising flocks if there was no need to eat meat? That's the question I'm posing.
So the voice behind me was going to say the same thing that I was going to say.
Well,
Sacrifices.
okay, that's a good thing. Sacrifices is a good answer too. Although at this point in Genesis, we don't know anything about that, right? But that's neither here nor there. I like that because it fits in with what we've said before about the whenever God gave them clothing to hide themselves from their nakedness, it had to be at the cost of some animal's life.
Right.
I figured we might say a word or two. Beg your pardon?
Transportation.
Okay, you guys, I'm much happier now. I don't worry so much about the fact that it made sense to raise flocks.
So mine's a little bit on a side trail,
Okay,
and that's if you looked at the definition of Cain,
yeah,
well, look at the definition of Havel or Abel.
Yeah.
That's kind of a strange definition.
What does it mean?
Okay, now I got to dig it back up again.
Yeah.
Hang on. It was.
Is that right?
She just said it. Vapor, breath, vanity, and then the origins. It says to act emptily, to become vain.
Don't know. That's a good point. I don't know what. Don't know what. That must be why I don't have in my Bible what it means. I don't know. Any other thoughts? Mark's got a thought.
All right. So you can say that it was just for sacrifice. However, since we know that the Torah was from the beginning, when you offer a sacrifice, some of those sacrifices are to be eaten by the offerer.
That's true, but probably the most important sacrifice is the whole burnt offering. But that's fine. That's fine. So I'm not going to the mat on this vegetarian thing. I'm just talking about it.
Oh, I personally, I don't know if one sacrifice was better than the other, because it does say that obedience is better than sacrifice. I think it has more to do with their individual attitudes, because obviously Cain didn't have a good attitude, and even God tells him, if you do well, will you not be accepted?
Yep.
So he's not really telling him that your sacrifice is bad. It's just that there was something wrong with his attitude or something.
I really want to get into that in great detail.
So the Lord's offering him right there. I mean, here's your opportunity to repent.
Yeah.
He just goes right
The other
and
direction.
does the very opposite of what he should do.
Yeah. I think it's fine. I guess what you said and what you said are true. I think you guys are all, real advanced. But a lot of times people read this, Abel kept flocks, Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to Yahweh, but Abel brought fat portions of some of the firstborn of his flock. Yahweh looked with favor on Abel's offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry and his face was downcast. You have to explain that to people. It's not clear why God did this, but I think what you say is true. One of the clues is he brought some of the fruits of the soil, whereas Abel brought the fat portions of the firstborn. So, and that points to attitude. You can almost envision Cain saying, "Oh man, I got to go through this sacrifice stuff here. Go get some of that stuff over there, and we'll give that." Whereas Abel, on the other hand, thought it was important enough to give him, as Hallmark says, the very best, right? So you can see, you have to kind of read into it, but you can see there was a difference in attitude. There's a difference in attitude. But the one thing that really gets me is that God he recognized it. He shows that, he looked with favor, whatever that means, upon Abel's offering, but he did not look with favor upon Cain's. And then, so what's Cain? He gets mad, right? It's the one that kills me, his cast. What's driving him at this point in time? So he was hurt because he tried real hard, but he what he wanted. Yeah.
I once.
Yep. John?
Back to you. Reason why did they have the animals? Good biblical permaculture.
Okay.
You need to mix the animals, chickens or whatever.
Yep. Okay.
Hey, there's another episode in Scripture, and we just talked. It was the deceiving, and then this was a type of deceiving. In the Hebrew, brothers has the blessing, everything else like that. Younger brother doesn't, so I might have played into it.
Yep. That's okay. Mark's got something.
I think that the offerings had to do with this. Numbers 18:15. Every first issue of the womb of all flesh, whether man or animal, which they offer to the Lord, shall be yours. So the first from all flesh is to be offered to the Lord. One of the sons completed that. Also, on the first day of the first fruits, when you present a new grain offering to the Lord, all your feast of weeks you're to present to the Lord. One of the sons didn't do that.
Yeah.
So I think it has to do with one brought the first and the other one did not.
Okay. Okay. But I agree with that. I still like the attitude thing, though, because I think that comes through, too. Polly's got something.
So I'd like to share the thoughts of the writer of Hebrews, chapter 11, on
Okay.
this topic.
Oh, that's a good one. Yep, I got that down.
Okay? And I'm going to back up a little bit so we have the context of what the writer has in mind when he talks about Abel. And I'll start at Hebrews 11:1.
He-
Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel offered a better sacrifice than Cain did, and by faith he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith he still speaks even though he is dead.
Yep.
So
That's really
what are your
good.
thoughts on
Well,
that?
that pretty much nails it in terms of where we've been going and the right way to look at it. It even said, I forgot the exact word, but God said that he favored Abel's offering. Whereas here it just says he looked upon it. So it definitely points, just really nails the fact that Abel's offering was satisfactory and acceptable to God, and Cain's wasn't. And it was from the heart. Yeah, faith. Chapter 11 in Hebrews, they always taught me that was the all of faith, because every one of those.
There are a lot of commentary. 9, Peter says, hearts are purified by faith.
That's good. That's good. Mine was just as good, And in verse 6, God confronts him, and he says, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? In other words, he's saying, you knew what you needed to do, and you didn't do it. So, that's what he's saying. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. I think there's just tons there. John?
That word there for sin, a slightly different variation of it is the sacrifice or the fix for that sin as well. I think it's sacrifice or something
Okay.
like that. But I did a word study on that.
Okay.
They're very close.
Okay. So, what is Cain's position? What is his frame of mind that sin is crouching at his door? And God tells him, you must master it. Where is Cain's mind and heart?
I'm going to say he's in the valley of decision.
Well, he is, but and we'll learn obviously in the next sentence that he makes the wrong one.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is the things that are welling up inside of Cain are things that well up inside of us, right? Their jealousy, their anger, their rebellion, they're those kinds of things. And he's saying right there, this is where the battle is. This is where you fight the battle.
It's funny, at the mezuzah, where we put the 10 Commandments, it tells you this is sin, this isn't sin. Mm-hmm. So at the door, it defines what the sin is. I think that's interesting.
I looked up that word, sin is at your door.
Uh-huh.
And it said, sin stretches oneself out, like lying down and stretching out across the door, the opening, the entrance, or the gateway. It rests there. And then it says, sin longs and desires to have dominion and rule over you. So it's just waiting there. Made me think of a snake.
Yeah.
Just basking in the sun
Yep,
right there
yep.
at the opening, all stretched out.
All stretched out, just waiting to trip you up. This also reminds me of the passage in, again, Matthew chapter 5, where Yeshua's going through, he basically makes the point, sin begins in your heart. It's, if you look upon a woman with lust, you've already sinned. So this, I think it's all part of this same thing, but what was revealing to me, and I still think it's kind of important, is that, like I say, this is where the battle's fought. This is where you need to get control of the situation, because if you don't, sin's going to have its way.
The angel of death wants to go through the door and kill you.
There you go.
But if you put the mark over the doorpost, right, it's put at bay.
Yeah. Yeah.
One more thing. He does draw a distinction. He says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And then he makes the distinction, if you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door. So if you do well, he's saying, sin will leave you alone.
Yes.
Meaning, obey the commands.
Yeah, do the right
what you're
thing and you
supposed to
won't have
do,
this problem. Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, I know me personally, have learned things the hard way, that if you put yourself in a situation where you shouldn't be, and at one point I was young and stupid, and we've all been there where we just get in situations where we shouldn't be, and that's when sin happens.
Mm-hmm.
But, we weren't, and I know for myself, not doing what I should do. But I like the way it says, if you don't do that, sin's there waiting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a verse that says, Satan roams around like
Yeah.
a lion,
Looking
looking who he can devour.
Yeah.
And those that he devours are those who are,
Yeah.
putting themselves in
Yeah, that's
compromising
right.
positions.
Well, and I think the thing that challenged me was along those same lines is you must master it. You need to figure out where this happens, and you've got to fix it right there.
So to avoid getting involved in a bar fight, you don't go to the bar?
There you go. That's about the best way to put that.
Yeah, I was just reading, now Cain talked with Abel, his brother.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what that conversation was about.
Well, yeah, you do wonder.
Okay, and it came to pass, there's a time period here, and it came to pass where Cain rose up when they were in the field. It was his opportunity to kill Abel. There was nobody around, and it was like a premeditated thing, because I think...
You keep getting ahead of me, but yes.
I think when they were talking, I don't know if they were talking about the fact that God rejected Cain's offering and accepted Abel's, or if there were other issues going on between the two brothers. But anyway, Cain waited until they were in the field, and that's when he decided to kill. I don't think it was a right then and there thing. I think it was a premeditated, because I think that Cain was going to, already had it in his mind and heart, he was going to kill his brother.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with you. It says, we have the statement from God right before it that says, if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. The next verse says, now Cain said to his brother, let's go out to the field. So it's like he heard the sermon but didn't pay attention to it, right? So because he said, let's go out to the field, and I agree with you, Joe. His point was, let's go out to the field because there I won't be seen. And this was all in his heart. And he went out there and he rose up and he attacked his brother and killed him. One of the other things that's just come unto me lately, we're in chapter 4 of the whole Bible, and we've already got a brother killing his brother. There could have been a lot of other sins that could have been talked about. You can hardly think of one worse than this. You know, this is a bad deal. And yet, this is the one God puts first in the Bible for us to think about. So there's obviously a lot there to be thought about. Paul.
So it made me think about James chapter 1, verse 14, where it says, each person is, I'll read it out of the complete Jewish translation, Jewish Bible. Each person is being tempted whenever he's being dragged off and enticed by the bait of his own desire. Then, having conceived, the desire gives birth to sin, and when sin is fully grown, it gives birth to death. So the thought there is, okay, what was Cain's desire? Well, it seems like the first desire would be to be recognized and have maybe an approved sacrifice like his brother did. But if it's true that he didn't bring the first fruits, then he didn't have a desire to follow Torah or the commandments.
Yep.
He just wanted the end result of, hey, I got rewarded too.
Yeah.
And yet, the next desire would be the desire to get rid of the competition, to kill off his brother, which still wouldn't get him the recognition that he wanted from God.
No.
But I guess if you're a bad kid, sometimes you get more recognition from your parents
Well,
than you do. Well,
I agree with that, but I don't know if I want to go there with that.
Okay, attention. You know, but the question would be also like, okay, what was he going to accomplish by killing his brother? And so that warning from God is like, hey, wait a minute, you can turn this around, and you don't have to fall prey to this.
Yeah, but he clearly didn't
He
listen.
clearly didn't. Yeah. And it kind of reminds me that there's a lot of people, if you ask, what do you want? Do people want life? They would love to have everlasting life, or but they don't want to follow Torah. They
want a shortcut.
They don't want to do what is right. They just want the end result. I want the reward.
Yep. They want to cheat the system.
No.
I would like to talk about a little bit what Paul just mentioned and what you had mentioned, Jerry, about, but you must master it. Sin crouching at the door, but you must master it. And it has to do with Revelation, which I was dwelling on when you first talked about the tree of life, and that you were going to kind of ponder on that a little bit.
Yep.
Because Revelation 1 tells us, to him that overcomes, I will give the right to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. So there's something to do with overcoming that you must master or overcome that in order to inherit what Paul said. Everyone wants to inherit life, but not willing to really take the steps to overcome that they need to master.
Yeah.
And then Revelation, the last verse in the last chapter in Revelation also tells us that blessed are those who keep the commands, that they may have the right to eat of the tree of life and may go into the gates of the city. So there's something about mastering and overcoming, and we have the guide given to us to do it, but how hard it is to stay on task.
Yeah. One of the things that John, that's really good. One of the things that John brought up earlier that fits into this whole thing is God doesn't demand that we be perfect at it, but he demands that we quickly admit when we goofed up. And I often think about this, and the best example is David, because David did a lot of horrible things, not the least of which is having Bathsheba's husband, Uriah the Hittite, murdered, right? And when he was brought face to face with that, he didn't do what we've seen here, make excuses or explain how it happened. He immediately said, yep, boy, I did that. That's terrible. He confessed it immediately and repented and sought forgiveness immediately. I think that's the real key. Mastering it's the goal. But when you master it, when you're in the pursuit of mastering it, you're going to fail a time or two or more. And when you fail, you got to handle that immediately. John, no, I'm sorry, Joe. Just a second. We don't want you to talk without a microphone.
I was just looking further down. I might be a little bit premature in saying this, but I was looking down the line there. This killing of Cain, his brother, had a domino effect. That down through all the different generations, there was trouble along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is, yeah, you could make a strong argument that it was this sin, behavior, that was the seed of the reason that the earth became such that God had to destroy it. Right? John?
In defense of Cain,
Oh, my gosh. Poor Cain got a rotten deal, huh?
well, it's assuming he's going there to kill him.
Yeah.
But before they did that, they talked.
We're,
And Cain talked with Abel, his brother. Verse
8. Well, yeah,
So if
mine.
it was just pure out premeditated murder, why doesn't he sneak up on him and whack him over the head?
Well, because I guess he was, in the middle of all these people, and he didn't want to see him. But the point is, I don't get that they were talking. I mean, Joe said that too. Mine just says,
Verse 8,
then,
and Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field. What does yours say?
mine says, now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field.
Well, that's different.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
different. That I will fully
don't know
accept the
which one's
criticism
better.
that this is the nearly inspired version, and that could be wrong. But I don't know. Somehow or another, the picture of them sitting there chatting doesn't strike me as very
Well,
realistic. Because
yeah,
think of the
look-
chats that Joseph had with his brothers. Those were always pretty one-sided chats and didn't go very well.
Well,
I mean,
when you're in a
Joseph's
pit-
brothers couldn't
when
even
you're in a
stand and
pit,
talk
there's-
to him.
When you're in a pit, there's not much you can do about it.
No, but what I'm saying,
I'm just, because at the end of the day, why doesn't Yahweh just kill him and judge him? Not only does he not kill him, he says, if someone kills you, it's fivefold against them.
yeah,
Sevenfold. That's even better.
that's fair. I don't have a good answer for that one. Sure.
I'm going way off the ranch on this one.
Uh-oh.
Okay? So, scold me. All right. So, one of the things could be is that under the Torah, if you get into a fight and you accidentally kill someone, you have a city of refuge to flee to. Cain had no city of refuge to flee to. So why does he say, look, I have to hide from you and become a fugitive and wander the earth. Now anyone who finds me will kill me. And that's when Yah said, no, I will put a sign so that anyone who does, then that would be avenged. Could it be that it was a fight, an argument, and an accident? Don't know.
Well,
I said I
that's
was
fine.
going way
That's
off
fine.
the ranch.
That's okay. The truth of the matter is, there seems likely to be some sort of a tie to this city of refuge kind of thing.
Well, Cain builds a city, doesn't he? He
I
goes to
give
a
you
city.
that. I give you that. To me, the malice aforethought of the thing seems clear. But like I say, I've been wrong about a lot of stuff. So, yeah.
I'm going to ask a question that's kind of silly, but where did all these people come from?
That question always gets asked once or twice. The best answer I can come up with is that these people lived for a lifetime of about 1,000 years, and in terms of the genealogies, they tell you they lived 100 and some odd years and had a kid, and whose name it was, and then they lived so and so many more years and had other sons and daughters. So they had other sons and daughters, all of them. So the bottom line is, when Cain marries these girls, they're definitely, if not sisters, cousins, you know? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. A lot can happen in 800 years. So that's where they came from. That's my opinion. No, that's a very good question. The question is, how old were Cain and Abel when this event occurred? No idea.
Yeah, it just records the two that in the Bible that are relevant to the story. That doesn't mean that Eve didn't have a whole bunch of more children.
Yep. Let's move on. I'm feeling a little bit pressured here. The one of the ones I like, though, verse 9, Yahweh said to Cain, "Where's your brother Abel?" And then Cain's answer. Cain's answer is basically, I mean, I used to say this all the time, well, I don't know, it's not my day to watch him. You know, and this is kind of what he's saying. I don't know. Is it my job to keep track of that guy? That's the attitude I get from that statement. Do you? So, but what is the answer to, am I my brother's keeper, from what we know in the Torah?
Well, obviously it's yes.
Yes,
but does he know that? Does he really not? I mean, is it, you know?
Well, what you're saying is he may just really not know that?
Well,
We're giving him credit for knowing a lot of other things about the Torah.
well, he's not obeying it very well.
Yeah, well, that's a fact. That's a fact.
He's not the
So
smartest.
you don't think this is a kind of a
Oh,
sarcastic?
definitely. It's definitely easy to make that argument, but I mean, I don't know.
Maybe not. Okay. Well, I don't want to be too hard on the guy. Maybe. But then God goes on to say in verse 10, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth."
Here's a really nasty one. You don't like my sacrifice?
Yeah? Joe?
I'm just looking when you say, "What have you done?"
What?
This is the second time God had to ask that question.
Yeah.
First time when he said, when the Lord said to the woman, "What is it you have done?"
Yeah.
And then over here, he's asking Cain, "What have you done?"
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing about that, of course, is God knows very well what they've done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The point is, this is their opportunity to admit it. The way they answer this question is critically important. Now, Eve's answer wasn't very good, but I've maintained that Cain's answer is horrible.
Well, he doesn't make a statement. He doesn't say, "Oh, I'm naked."
That's a fact.
He just says, "Oh," he answers them with a question. "Am I my brother's keeper?"
No, that's not the one. Well,
Does he make a statement later on?
the "what have you done" thing is made after he's because what he asked him is, "Where's your brother?" And he says, "I don't know."
But he doesn't make a statement, is my point.
No. But then when
answers the question.
God says, "What have you done?" What does Cain say? He says, "My punishment's more than I can bear. Today you're driving me from the land, and I'll be hidden from your presence. I'll be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." He doesn't say a thing about being sorry.
No, I agree with that. He's acknowledging the punishment he received, but it's different than what Eve or at least Eve said. They make a statement, "We're naked." We are declaring for ourselves that we are making the determination that we are naked.
Okay.
He never made that type of
That's
I studied this in this commercial redemption stuff, and if
Okay.
you don't make statements, that's a crucial thing. You don't
Okay.
have to defend statements.
If you don't make them.
When you know, yeah. So when you answer a question with a question, of course, it has to be pertinent to the question, pertinent to the discussion.
Yeah.
but-
Okay. I can learn a lot from you, John. How to stay out of trouble. But anyway, so how did Cain make a living? It says he grew crops, right? And so here's God saying, "Not anymore, you don't," right? So what does that mean? How is Cain then supposed to survive?
So the land's vomited him out. Now he's got to
you
go
can
to
certainly
the
say
city?
that. Yeah. But he basically is going to survive by wandering around, getting people to give him stuff. Is essentially what he's going to do. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't really say that the ground will not produce anything for him. It says that it will no longer yield its best for you, or, and let's see, verse, I lost it.
Yes, mine says it will no longer yield its crops for you, verse 12.
Okay, verse 12. And then this one says, when you farm it, will no longer yield its strength to you, in this translation. Okay. And in this other translation, it says, well, I can't read it, it's in Hebrew. But bottom line is that it won't, it didn't say it won't yield anything.
No, it didn't say that. It just says you're going to be a pretty poor farmer. Yeah.
In my Bible, I think you read in yours on verse 12, it says, later on it says, you will be a felon, I think is what yours said.
Mine says restless wanderer.
Oh, well,
What's
mine
yours?
says you will be a vagrant and
Okay.
a wanderer of the earth, and I wasn't sure what vagrant meant. So I just Googled it real quick, and that meant a person without a settled home or regular work who wanders from place to place and lives by begging.
Yeah.
So that's a
Matter of
very
fact,
specific
yeah,
word
yeah,
to
yeah,
use.
yeah, yeah.
And then I
That's-
was kind of thinking that's a little weird if they said he's a wanderer basically, and then called him a wanderer again.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, what's more to this word? And so, yeah.
Yeah. Vagrancy that's a law on the public law books. And it essentially means that. You're wandering around without any visible means of support, begging for money.
Okay, when God told him, let's see, I lost my place here. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield its strength.
Okay.
Okay, that I interpret that as a stalk of wheat or grain that is healthy and full and ripe and everything else. I mean, it's there, but it's weak. It's a weakling.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I say, you won't be a very good farmer. Not saying you won't be one, but you won't be a very good, you won't be very successful at it.
So the blood is defiled the land.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things this point in verse 10, God says, "Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Now, that's not the first time that phrase is used. I wish I had some right off the top of my head, but there are several places in the Bible where God talks about the blood cries out to me from the ground.
Well, Sodom and Gomorrah, they talk about they cry out. I don't know if it's the blood or not in Sodom and Gomorrah.
I don't remember, but I guess my point is that I think I've often thought God keeps track of all of this stuff, especially bloodshed, and He knows.
But it's almost like the ground knows as well, because
Yeah.
to give him blessings from the ground would be an insult to, on top of his being at least manslaughtered.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when you think about this stuff, he's a restless wanderer, and God says, well, that's not true. If anybody kills Cain, he'll suffer vengeance 7 times over. And the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from Yahweh's presence and lived in the land of Nod, which means wandering, east of Eden. So I don't know. What is the mark of Cain? What on earth could this possibly be?
Well, in my study of Hebrew, and especially the Paleo-Hebrew, which is interesting, is actually the sign of the cross.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what that's referring to.
Okay.
As a form of
Identification, basically.
well, not just identification, but it also that mark also has that meaning of covenant.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, it's kind of like that God is saving him from his real
Purpose.
Well, no, his real judgment in that sense, because blood for blood,
Yeah.
later on in the Torah, so.
And that brings up the whole question of why didn't he just immediately get executed? But I don't have a good answer for that one either. I was thinking, so is the mark kind of like if you, in high school, we had to read the Scarlet Letter, Hester Prynne had to run around with a red A on her chest all the time because she was an adulteress. So it's something along those lines, you think?
Well, he's saying it's to save him, though. It was a benefit.
Well, that's right. Well, it does say that. It says that anyone that sees this sign will know not to kill you because he will suffer vengeance 7 times over, which is hard to imagine getting killed 7 times. But I'm sorry. I get a little confused with this one, this part of it. Anybody have any good thoughts about that, Esther?
It might be the first time where mercy and grace was shown. Because
Good point. I mean, it's obviously that
mercy and
happened.
grace was
Yeah.
abundant throughout the Old Testament. It's just not New Testament stuff.
Absolutely. And this, Paul, I'm also good at thinking outside the lines sometimes. God's in a position now where he needs people, right? He's trying to populate the earth. So killing Cain's not a step in the right direction. So he says, okay, fine, I'll show you grace. I won't go ahead and execute the judgment you deserve. But in so doing, then he gives birth to a lot of other people who are every bit as bad. So you wonder whether or not that was a good idea. Just making all that up. Yeah, they're not his, that's for sure. That's sure. But I do get a little confused toward the end of this. We got enough time, I hope, to finish chapter 4, because it'd be nice to finish a whole chapter. So you stopped at verse 15. So I'll read 16 to the end, if that's okay. It's okay with you? So starting at verse 16. So Cain went out from Yahweh's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain lay with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Arad, and Arad was the father of Mehujael, and Mehujael was the father of Methushael. Methushael was the father of Lamech. Lamech married 2 women, one named Adah and the other Zillah. Adah gave birth to Jabal. He was the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. His brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father of all who play the harp and the flute. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain's sister was named Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech is 77 times. So Adam, okay, there's that. Just to finish the chapter. Adam lay with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son and named him Enosh. At that time, men began to call on the name of Yahweh. So we did finish the chapter for what it's worth. So what do you make of all of that? Like I say, I have a hard time with that, but I'm really interested in everybody else's opinion. Polly.
Well, I have a question for you. Who is it that Cain is aware of that he is afraid that whoever finds me will kill me? Because he seems to be aware that there's more people that exist other than him, his brother, his mom, and his dad. And then suddenly we have a wife that comes onto the scene.
Well,
so-
that's a couple generations later, but yes.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
Oh, man, I don't know. I guess my only, it does tie back into what Paul was saying about the kinsman redeemer, if you will. Someone has the right, well, Abel's brothers, I guess, have the right to judge, to kill.
That's my thought.
Yeah, to kill Cain. And so that's what Cain's basic complaint is that because I've been found guilty of, I won't say murder, I'll say manslaughter, that there's these avengers out there, that avengers of blood that can do me in. And God says, I'll protect you by putting this sign on you. Where they come from, I have no idea. I guess they're the brothers of, like Mark says, a lot can happen in 800 years. So they're brothers of them. They almost have to be, right? But anyway, from what it says here, that's what Cain is afraid of. He's afraid of being killed. Wanda.
One thing to bear in mind with Scripture is they don't always tell of all the descendants.
That's for sure.
It's quite possible, especially since male children are mentioned more often than
Women,
female.
yep.
Yeah, they could have had some girls first.
Could be.
And so, and they could have had other sons besides Cain and Abel and Seth.
Well, they probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in what order, we don't know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 130 years before they, I mean,
Yeah.
there could have been a lot of kids being born.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So there's probably way more people than we imagine in our thinking.
Yeah. Mhm. Hard job, isn't it? John's been struggling with it for a long time.
Well, it does answer the question what they did for a living, because it says the one son was a shepherd, and the other was a musician. So
Yeah, but now, like I say, that's a couple of generations, but yes, that's true. That's true. Well, there's another key there where it says, 17, Cain lay with his wife, she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. So if you can't make the ground grow, what do? You build a city. And cities, if you kind of notice in Scripture, always tend to be not so good places, really. And so, if he was building a city, you can bet he was the mayor, if you will. He was running things in the city, so it's a position of power. Yeah, yeah. Who has a Alfonso?
Okay.
Okay.
I got one question. I guess
I bet you have several.
on Cain's side or Cain's side,
Yep.
he has an Enoch.
Yes.
And then you look on Shet's side, he also has an Enoch.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's interesting. And then this other one about the people. So I'm reading in 126. He said, Elohim said, let us make man. It didn't say Adam. It just said man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock. So that's an interesting.
So your thought there
It's
is
possible.
is that God created more than one man, or he created several of them. Could be.
Let us make man and let them, plural,
Yeah.
roll over.
Mankind, let us make mankind. Yeah, that's all right.
I think that theory you're referring to is commonly known as the sixth-day man, where God created human couples, and they were told to dominate the earth and spread and multiply.
Okay.
And that does eliminate the problem of incest.
Yes.
Because God provided that group of humans
A diverse thing.
for Adam and Eve and their children.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there is this problem with incest genetically, but I bet it wouldn't have occurred in the first generation. It probably would have occurred later. That's neither here nor there. Your point's still well taken.
So Seth is mentioned because Cain has been like Reuben. He's kicked out. He's no longer the firstborn or has that capacity.
Yeah.
Abel is dead, so Seth is.
Yeah. You got to have the next guy.
Yeah.
If they don't mention Seth, there's nobody to carry on God's seed, right? Yeah. That's a good point. What she said was in the third generation. So there was Cain, and then Enoch, and then.
So is that when they start saying, saith the Lord? Like
Saith.
saith the Lord?
Thus saith, never mind.
Does anybody have any understanding of this little thing that Lamech says in verse 23 and 24 about he's bragging to his wives, I've killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech is 77 times. Anybody? I've got a couple things I read about that. I was just wondering if anybody knows anything.
When I read that, what comes to mind is I believe it's in the New Testament where it says that 70 times 7 you forgive,
Yep.
70 times 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know exactly how it applies there, but that is triggered with me too. The one thing I read about that made the most sense was that it was an indication of the fact that mankind was in a downward spiral, because it's a braggadocio kind of a statement, and he's basically saying, my great grandfather or whatever killed somebody and he avoided the vengeance of seven times. That's nothing. I killed someone for even less reason than that, and I'm going to avoid 77 times. So he's basically bragging about the fact that he's a man of violence and gets away with it. That was the best one I read. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that Cain was killed later on by one of the relatives because in my Torah that's talked about this guy, his name starts with an L,
Lamech?
I think it was 70-some years that he's probably, I think he's the one that killed Cain.
Oh, that could be. That make a little more sense. He'd be killing his great-grandfather or something, but that could be. Well, that's true. That's true. Someday, to me, that whole passage there, with the descendants of Cain is very cryptic, and I don't understand it. But I'm sure there's some meaning to it. The thing that's that's both encouraging and discouraging is when you go to find out other stuff, and somebody else must have an idea what this means. You come away thinking, no, they don't either. So, anyway. So at the end, I'm sorry, Pat, go for it.
In 23, when it says that I have slain a man to my wounding, it means that I was defending myself, for he struck me first. It wasn't a premeditated murder.
Yeah.
So my thought is that Cain would be protected 7 times, but since mine was not my fault, I killed him
So
in
I should be.
defense, so I need even more
Well,
grace.
that could be. That fits. That fits with that. Again, I don't even, the more than that, I'm not sure why it's there at all.
Well, this is just an observation, but I find it interesting that they're naming a lot of the women in the, like the wives of, I don't know if they named Cain's wife, but
No, they only named those two, Adah and Zillah.
the wives of Lamech, yeah.
Yeah. The others, they hadn't really named the wives.
Other than Eve, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
All the way till you get to Sarah, they don't really name a woman's name of the.
Yeah. Other than we know Noah's wife's name.
Is that in the Bible though?
Well, no, but everybody knows it's Joan.
Joan
of Arc.
Oh.
I always get to do that at least
John
once.
tell you that one?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm gonna write that one down.
Okay. Let's do the last little verses and then we'll quit here.
Adah means ornament.
Okay. In verse 25 it says, Adam lay with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son, named him Enosh. At that time, men began to call on the name of Yahweh. I've written in my Bible that word call is different than usual, and I wrote the word profane. Yeah, but I don't know what I did that for. I'm not sure. Does it really? So it's, rather than that line, normally you would read that and you would think, oh, men began to worship the Lord. But what it really says is men began to profane his name. Is that right? Mm-hmm. I beg your pardon? Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm kind of pleased with where we got all tonight. You have something, Alfonso?
Yeah, when I'm looking at 4:23, and Lamech said to his wife Adah and Salah, hear my voice, wise Lamech, listen to my words, for I have killed a man for wounding me. That sounds like one, and then even a man for hurting me. That sounds like 2 men.
Yeah, that could be. That certainly could be. Although in Hebrew poetry, the first couple lines, he says, Adah and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. That's saying the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. And so the second, I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me, could also be that. What you say is true too. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying it could be that. A lot of times the Bible does that. It'll say one thing and it'll say the same thing again in the second sentence. But, you could be right too. It could be. This one's we're gonna have to ask this one. I want to all be together. We will ask this. Any other comments? Okay, let me close in prayer. Well, Father God, thank you for your word. Thank you for this chapter. Thank you for the things that have gone on here and the thought processes that it puts in our head. Help us to learn what we need to learn, Father God. Help us to be able to master the sin that crouches at our door. Keep us safe until we meet again and as we go through our coming week. In Yeshua's name, amen. Thank you very much. Did it rain?